Hi, this is Mr. West, and today you're watching a tutorial video on adding two proper fractions. This is from Math-DrIlls.com. Make sure to check out Math-DrIlls. They have lots of great math resources. For this worksheet, though, we're going to tackle a topic that most students really do not enjoy. So I have other explanation videos on fractions. Let me kind of give you a quick summary. So most common mistake that is often seen by students is, well, first off, I'm going to make your two pizzas or two circle fractions, and I'm going to make one into 1/2, and then I'm going to make another one into 1/4. And actually, I'm going to have it go this way. Okay, so let me just shade this in real quick for these both. There's 1/4, and there is 1/2. Doesn't have to be perfect. So if we have 1/2 and we add it to 1/4, what would you expect the answer to be? Well, for some of you, you might do this mistake, which is 1/2 plus 1/4, and you add the two top numbers, you get 2, you add the two bottom numbers, and you get 2/6. So if you look at 2/6, really what that is that is 1/3. Let me zoom in. So that is 1/3. 1/3 is actually less than 1/2. So looking at my true transpositions here, I'm going to transpose this over, and now we can see what the correct answer is. The correct answer should be 3/4. That was supposed to look way more clear than it did. So 3/4 should be our correct answers. So how do you get 3/4 from 1/2 and 1/4? Well, it's clearly not this, because 1/3 would be like this. 1/3 would be about that. So that's actually less than 1/2. So how can you add 1/4 to 1/2 and get something that's less? Well, that's because you don't follow just adding the top numbers and the bottom numbers together. That does not work. Okay? Instead, that's what you do for multiplication. But instead, we're going to do something else called finding a common denominator. So let's start with an easier example. And I think an easier one actually doesn't seem like it would be, but 16 is an easier example. Now, one thing I want to talk to you about is, as you're doing these problems, it would be very helpful to have a multiplication chart. So multiplication charts are easy to use, and it's easy, or helpful, I should say, for these types of problems, because it helps us understand the multiples of the numbers that both the numbers, I like to say, fit into. Okay, so I'd recommend having a multiplication chart handy. Now, what we need here is, if I actually go back, let me rewind. If I had 1/2 plus 1/4, I need a common denominator. So I want these two numbers to match, because we can add like fractions, but if they're different units, different sizes, then we can't add it. So we have to change the size of these to match. Well, it turns out that the easier thing to do is to change 1/2 into a fraction that looks like 1/4 by multiplying both the top and bottom number by 2. And we can do that because this is equal to 1. So once we do this, we get 2/4. And that makes sense. If you go over here back to our fraction, we can see clearly, now erase this mess, that 1/2 is the same thing as 1/4 plus 1/4. It's 2/4. Right? So 2/4 is another way to write 1/2, and now we can add those two fractions together by keeping the denominator the same. So you can see we keep the denominator the same, like units, and then we add the top numbers. This time we can add the top numbers, and we get 3/4. So we need to find a denominator that's the same between these two numbers, and clearly we don't have it for this problem. Well, what we might need is a multiplication chart. There's few that go up to 17, but if you have one, great. But we want to know, what can we have for both these numbers that multiply by something to equal a bigger number? If you are ever confused, you can always just multiply the two numbers together to find your new denominator. That will always work. You might need to reduce when you're done, but that will always work. So we can just have our new denominator be 34 for both these fractions. That always works, okay? It so happens to be with this problem that is the least common denominator, but let's just go one step at a time. Now, what we're going to do here is, now that we know our new denominator is 34, we want to know, how do we change 1/2, what do we multiply by to get to 34? We need to multiply something to the top and the bottom. Well, the number we're going to multiply to the top and bottom is clearly 17, right? That's the number we multiply together. So we're going to multiply 2 times 17 and 1 times 17. 2 times 17 is 34. That's where we got that from. And then we have 1 times 17, and that's just 17. Same thing with a 17. What do we multiply? Let me move this over. What do we multiply? Let me change this color. What do we multiply 1 and 17 by to get to 34? Well, we just multiply it by 2, okay? Like I said, we can just multiply the two denominators together. So we multiply these by 2, and we have 1 times 2 is 2, and then 17 times 2, of course, is 34. There's our common denominator. So it looks kind of messy, but what we now have is a new problem that looks like this. 17 over 34, that's the 34, plus 2 over 34, and now we have a common denominator. We have 34. So we're just going to go ahead and put that as our answer, the denominator, and now we just need to add the top. 17 plus 2 is 19 out of 34, and that's our answer. Okay, so the process is you can always multiply the two denominators together, but you might be able to find something that's smaller than that. I'm going to try to find a good example of a problem like that where you don't need to multiply the denominator together. Let's see here. Let's go to, it looks like most of these, that is going to be the case actually, that you're going to just multiply the two denominators together. Yeah, it looks like most of these are going to be that way. So it looks like a lot of these you can just multiply the two denominators together, and that's going to be your least common denominator. So we're probably just going to stick with that. That's not always the case, but again, you can always do that. That's the nice thing about it, is you can always do that. You just need to be mindful that you might need to reduce. So we're just going to go ahead and roll with this system. I'm going to jump up to number 1 now that we got the hang of it. And I'm going to see that once we multiply 4 and 7 together, our new denominator is going to be 28. So I'm going to make my two fractions 28 here. Okay, and obviously I multiplied this 4 times 7 to get to that 28. So now I need to multiply the 1 also times 7. If you're finding a common denominator, you just need to make sure you're multiplying the top and bottom number by the same thing. So I multiplied the 4 times the 7, and I get 28, and 1 times 7, I get 7. Same thing for this one. I'm going to change colors here. So I have 7 times 4, and then I want to do 4 times 4, and I get 16. So now I have my two common denominator fractions, and I can just simply add them together. There's my common denominator. I can just copy that down. I have 28 as my new base. Then I do 7 plus 16, and that should give me 23, and I am done. You need to check to see if you can reduce it. These do not have common factors because 23 is prime, but always make sure you can divide these, especially if they're both even. Make sure you can divide, if they can be reduced, to reduce them. Let's move on to number 11 since it's to the right. Sometimes you naturally want to go to 2, but I just want to move over to this one. So we have, this one's rather simple. We have two numbers here, 5 and 3, and we can just multiply the two denominators together to get our new common denominator, 15. What do we multiply? Let's change the colors here. Do it a different way. Maybe this will be more helpful. What do we multiply 5 by to get our new denominator? Well, we multiplied 5 times 3, so we need to multiply 1 times 3 also, and that gives us 3. Let's change this one to blue. Pardon me. So this is blue. This one's going to be our blue one. Okay, what do we multiply 3 by to get to 15? Well, we multiplied 3 times 5. That's how we got 15. So we also need to multiply that 2 times 5. So we multiply 2 times 5 and we get 10. And now we're just going to add these two numbers together. So anytime you're adding fractions, again, I just like repeating it so the more times you hear it, the better. We're just going to copy the same denominator down. Okay, that's very important. And now we just add the two top numbers. So 3 plus 10 equals 13. And there's our final answer. So you're going to use this process. Some of these have tougher denominators, like obviously 13 and 6. You're going to want to multiply 13 and 6. So that's going to give us 8, 1, 7, 78. So your denominator is going to be 7, 8. 78, I should say. And it's really not that bad. Make sure you just separate it like this. Okay, and then proceed from there. But the common denominator is going to be the most important thing. Multiplying these two numbers together. I'll do another one for you. So 17 and 5. Okay, you're going to want to do that, and we get 5, 3, 85. So this one's denominator is going to be 85. And then the last one, I'll do one more freebie. And again, if you have any questions on this, make sure to leave a comment below. Oops. So 19 times 4, I should probably do it. 6, 3, and then 7. 76. So The new denominator is going to be 76 for these ones. So some of the numbers aren't ideal, but that's what you're going to see in your math class, most likely in everyday life. Again, thanks for watching this video. Leave a comment if you need help or need help on a different topic, and I look forward to seeing you next time right here on Wes Explains Best.